Hi, Grandma here. I'm reading Tom Sawyer, and I'm going to be beginning today chapter 11. But before I begin, I need to talk about the crime that we saw committed, which was Muff Potter and Injun Joe first of all, they were robbing graves. They got a dead body out and put it in a wheelbarrow, but they did this for the doctor. Why would a doctor want to dig up a body and pay somebody to dig it up and then haul it away? Well, when I was younger, I used to think that people, when they were grave robbers, they broke into the caskets to see if they could get jewelry or gold teeth for profit. But when a doctor is involved, it is often so that they have a body to practice dissection on, so that they can explore the anatomy of the human body, to perhaps find out why that person died, so they become better doctors. Today, people donate their bodies to science for this purpose, and also we have computer programs that doctors don't have to cut into dead bodies. But I just wanted to bring that up in case you were wondering why the doctor wanted to dig up the body. So we're chapter 11 is called Tom's Conscience at Work. Close upon the hour of noon, the whole village was suddenly electrified with the ghastly news. No need of the as yet undreamed of telegraph, the tale flew from man to man, from group to group, from house to house, with little less than telegraphic speed. Of course, the schoolmaster gave holiday for that afternoon. The town would have thought strangely of him if he had not. A gory knife had been found close to the murdered man, and it had been recognized by somebody as belonging to Muff Potter, so the story ran. And it was said that a belated citizen had come upon Potter washing himself in the branch, that's a creek, about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and that Potter had at once sneaked off. Suspicious circumstances, especially the washing, which was not a habit with Potter. It was also said that the town had been ransacked for this murderer. The public are now not slow in the matter of sifting evidence and arriving at a verdict, but that he could not be found, that being Muff Potter. Horsemen had departed down all the roads in every direction, and the sheriff was confident that the murderer would be captured before night came. All the town was drifting toward the graveyard. Tom's heartbreak vanished over Becky giving him back that knob from the andiron, and he joined the procession, not because he would not 1,000 times rather go anywhere else, but because an awful, unaccountable fascination drew him on. Arrived at the dreadful place, he wormed his small body through the crowd and saw the dismal spectacle. It seemed to him an age since he was there before. Somebody pinched his arm. He turned and his eyes met Huckleberry's. Then both looked elsewhere at once and wondered if anybody had noticed anything in their mutual glance. But everybody was talking intently upon the grisly grisly spectacle. Poor fella, oh, poor young fella. This ought to be a lesson to grave robbers. Muff Potter'll hang for this if they catch him. This was the drift of remark, and the minister said, "It was a judgment. His hand is here." Now Tom shivered from head to heel, for his eye fell upon the stolid face of Injun Joe. At this moment, the crowd began to sway and struggle, and voices shouted, "It's him! It's him! He's coming himself!" "Who? Who?" from 20 voices. "Muff Potter! Hello, he's stopped! Look out! He's turning! Don't let him get away!" People in the branches of the trees over Tom's head said he wasn't trying to get away. He only looked perplexed. "Infernal impudence," said a bystander. "Wanted to come and take a quiet look at his work, I reckon. Didn't expect any company." The crowd fell apart now, and the sheriff came through, ostentatiously leading Potter by the arm. The poor fellow's face was haggard, and his eyes showed the fear that was upon him. When he stood before the murdered man, he shook as if with a palsy. He put his face in his hands, burst into tears. "I didn't do it, friends," he sobbed. "'Pon my word and honor, I never done it." And here's a picture, and you can see Tom and Huckleberry in the center of the picture. And this is Muff Potter here. "Who accused you?" shouted a voice. This shot seemed to carry home. Potter lifted his face, looked around him with a pathetic hopelessness in his eyes. He saw Injun Joe and exclaimed, "Oh, Injun Joe, you promised me you'd never." "Is this your knife?" And it was thrust before him by the sheriff. Potter would have fallen if he had not caught him and eased him to the ground. Then he said, "Something told me I didn't come back and get it." He shuddered, then waved his nerveless hand with a vanquished gesture and said, "Tell him, Joe, tell him. It ain't any use anymore." Then Huckleberry and Tom stood dumb and staring and heard the stony-hearted liar reel off his serene statement they expected every moment that the clear sky would deliver. I was wrong. This is not Muff Potter. This is Injun Joe. And you can see the boys are just sitting there with their mouths open. Anyway, going back to the reading. They expecting every minute that the clear sky would deliver God's lightnings upon his head and wondering to see how long the stroke was delayed. And when Injun Joe finished and still stood alive and whole, their wavering impulse to break their oath and save the poor betrayed prisoner's life faded and vanished away. For plainly this miscreant had sold himself to Satan. And it would be fatal to meddle with the property of such a power as that. "Why didn't you leave? What did you want to come here for?" somebody said. "I couldn't help it. I couldn't help it," Potter moaned. "I wanted to run away, but I couldn't seem to come anywhere but here." And he fell to sobbing again. Injun Joe repeated his statement just as calmly a few minutes afterward at the inquest under oath, and the boys, seeing that the lightnings were still withheld, were confirmed in their belief that Joe had sold himself to the devil. He was now become to them the most balefully interesting object they had ever looked upon, and they could not take their fascinated eyes from his face. They inwardly resolved to watch him nights when opportunity should offer, in the hope of getting a glimpse of his dreaded master, in other words, Satan. Injun Joe helped to raise the body of the murdered man and put it in a wagon for removal, and it was whispered through the shuddering crowd that the wound bled a little. The boys thought this happy circumstance would turn suspicion in the right direction, but they were disappointed, for more than one villager remarked, "It was within 3 feet of Muff Potter when it done it," meaning the body was still bleeding. Apparently that's a superstition that they felt like indicated that the person who murdered the body was nearby. Tom's fearful secret and gnawing conscience disturbed his sleep for as much as a week after this, and at breakfast one morning, Sid said, "Tom, you pitch around and talk in your sleep so much that you keep me awake about half the time." Tom blanched and dropped his eyes. "It's a bad sign," said Aunt Polly gravely. "What you got on your mind, Tom?" Nothing I know of," but the boy's hand shook so that he spilled his coffee. "And you do talk such stuff," Sid said. "Last night you said, 'It's blood, that's what it is.' You said that over and over, and you said, 'Don't torment me, so I'll tell.'" "Tell what? What is it that you'll tell?" Everything was swimming before Tom. There's no telling what might have happened now, but luckily the concern passed out of Aunt Polly's face, and she came to Tom's relief without knowing it. She said, "Sho, it's that dreadful murder. I dream about it most every night myself. Sometimes I dream it's me that done it." Mary said she had been affected much the same way, and Sid seemed satisfied. Tom got out of the presence as quickly as he possibly could, and after that he complained of a toothache for a week and tied up his jaws every night. So he tied up his jaws, saying it was a toothache, but he did it so he wouldn't talk at night. He never knew that Sid lay nightly watching and frequently slipped the bandage free, and then leaned on his elbow, listening a good while at a time, and afterwards slipped the bandage back in its place again. Tom's distress of mind wore off gradually, and the toothache grew irksome and was discarded. If Sid really managed to make anything out of Tom's disjointed mutterings, he kept it to himself. It seemed to Tom that his schoolmates never would get done holding inquests on dead cats, thus keeping his trouble present to his mind. Sid noticed that Tom never was a coroner at one of these inquiries, though it had been his habit to take the lead in all new enterprises. He noticed, too, that Tom never acted as a witness, and that was strange. And Sid did not overlook the fact that Tom even showed a marked aversion to these inquests and always avoided them when he could. Sid marveled but said nothing. However, even inquests went out of vogue at last and ceased to torture Tom's conscience. Every day or two during this time of sorrow, Tom watched his opportunity and went to the little grated jail window, smuggled such small comforts through to the murderer as he could get hold of. The jail was a trifling little brick den that stood in the marsh at the edge of the village, and no guards were afforded to it. Indeed, it was seldom occupied. These offerings and friendly overtures greatly helped to ease Tom's conscience. The villagers had a strong desire to tar and feather Injun Joe and ride him on a rail for body snatching, but so formidable was his character that nobody could be found who was willing to take the lead in that matter, so it was dropped. He had been careful to begin both of his inquest statements with the fight, without confessing the grave robbery that preceded it. Therefore, it was deemed wisest not to try the case in the courts at the present. Very interesting. About grave robbery. And even though today it is considered all right to dig up graves for historical purposes, it has become a problem with Native Americans. They don't want any of their ancients dug up. And so many museums that used to have Native American skeletons on display or being studied have had to bury those remains after photographing them, of course. Anyway, see you next time.